How about now? Good evening, members of council, staff, and guests. Welcome to our regular Wednesday night council meeting and committee of the whole. And I would ask members of council if they would rise while we do the commitment for the town. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you. So moving on to the approval of the agenda, it is moved by Councillor Vadeboncoeur and seconded by Councillor Cummings that the agenda of the regular council meeting of April 24th, 2019 be approved as presented. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 4, declaration of pecuniary interest. If anyone has such, they may do so at the appropriate time. Under 5, we have deputations and presentations, and this evening we have a presentation from Gary Molnar with Mr. Will Baird of Huron Historical Parks, read the Festival and Events Ontario Award. Welcome, Will.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and members of the council. Thanks for taking a few minutes with me tonight. This is a very good news situation. I'd like to pass around a plaque that we've got for you guys from tonight for your consistent support of Pumpkinferno. Before I do that, I'll just give you a little statistical update on it. In 2015, when I came to see council here, I kind of begged for this crazy little idea of some plastic pumpkins scattered throughout a naval site nearby here, and they looked at me with some odd looks, but gave me some money gratefully that was able to turn a small event into something that's had such a significant impact locally. Since 2015, we've had over 52,000 people in the month of October that have come to Penetanguishene to visit. Out of the volume of those 52,000 people, nearly 65% of them live further than 80 kilometers away. So that has a significant economic impact. In terms of the economic impact, the tourism regional model is showing it over the 5 years as about $4.1 million to the local economy. So thank you very much to council for being a part of that, and very simply, thank you, and here's your plaque. Thank you.
Okay, then we are moving on to 6A, and adoption of minutes not already confirmed. And it is moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Vadeboncoeur that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Regular council, April 10, 2019. Committee of the whole, April 10, 2019. Concerns? None? All in favor? Thank you. And that moves us on to the consent agenda, and its correspondence from the Township of Tiny. Read the Centennial Drive elevated tank. Did I have a motion to that?
Sorry to interrupt, Your Worship. I just noticed there isn't a motion directly related to that, but it is to be received, just received for information.
Just for information. Okay, thank you. And I think I have some numbers in here that are backwards. All the committee of the whole ones are showing us 6A, and I believe they should be 9. Because we're going to move on to matters for considering Main Street.
Sorry, Your Worship, if we just get a mover and a seconder to receive that item for information, that would be great.
Okay, Councillor Cummings and Councillor LaRose, all in favor. Thank you. So moving on to 8A, Main Street Art Project, and that is moved by Deputy Mayor Dubo and seconded by Councillor Clue, that the call for public art proposals project number 2019-15 be approved for public release as per staff report PL 2019-19. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will speak very briefly to this. As council remembers, we did put aside $20,000 for this project. Very happy to report that we have a committee that's been meeting, and we've come together and now ready for a call for public proposals, hoping that we will get a lot of interest. We had the big discussion about how broad do we go, and we decided that Simcoe County-wide and the cities of Barrie and Orillia, and also if somebody can demonstrate that they have a keen interest or were perhaps born in Penetanguishene but now live outside of our communities, that we would consider a proposal from that respect as well. So we're well on our way, hoping the timelines are kind of quick, but hoping that we'll have something for council to approve in June. So if there's any questions, Andrea's here, or we'll try to answer your concerns.
Questions or concerns? There being none, all in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to 8B. And that is moved by Councillor Boisdevant and seconded by Councillor Cummings, that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene ratify the Mayor's appointments to the following town advisory committees: the Community Wellbeing Committee, Bonita DeRush, Kaylee Heath, Beth Dubo, David Myers, Lisa Valley, Fran Morrow, Christine Johnson, and Council Rep Councillor Jill Sinema. And on the Line Fence Viewing Committee, Lois Lipton, Ross Spearin, and Don Charlebois. And Property Standards Committee, again, Lois Lipton, Ross Spearin, and Don Charlebois. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 9A, presentation and consideration of report committee of the whole. And we have moved by Recreation Communities, Deputy Mayor Dupo, and no,
Dan.
no, Mr. LaRose. Moved by Councillor LaRose and seconded by Councillor Sinema, that the recommendation contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Recreation and Community Services section be approved. Concerns? No. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Clue and seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo, that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Planning and Development Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these? No. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Mayette and seconded by Councillor Levy, that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole related to the Transportation and Environmental Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these? No. All in favor? It is moved by Councillor Cummings, seconded by Councillor Vadeboncoeur, that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Finance and Corporate Services section be approved. Does anyone wish to pull any of these? No. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 10, presentations and consideration of reports, special committees. There are none. 11, motions of which notice has been previously given. None. 12, notices of motion. There are none. 13, considerations of bylaws. It is moved by Councillor Vadeboncoeur and seconded by Councillor Cummings that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene introduce the following bylaws: 2019-29, 2019-30, 2019-31, 2019-32, and 2019-33, and that bylaws be read a first time and deemed to be read a second and third time and carried. Concerns? All in favor? Thank you. Well, it says 33 here.
33 is in the confirmation bylaw.
There it is here, see? We have it twice, eh? So then that brings us to question period from media and public. There are none. And then we have the announcements and inquiries. Any announcements? Councillor Rose?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one announcement, and I don't know whether Council has received a letter that was sent out to all the Main Street people. We did get it. Just for everybody's information, though, we did mail out a letter to the Main Street people on both sides, all the way up and down. And the letter, just for the public, was recognizing that it was a big challenge with the road construction this year. And we're going to be doing our All Things Canadian Festival, but instead of launching it off at the park, we want to launch it off on Main Street. Probably at the tennis courts or up this end, you know, just to say it's officially over, done. All the lines will be painted and everything will be pretty. But knowing that, we want this to be a very nice festival and a very good festival going forward. So RCS department made a very good gesture and did this mail out asking the Main Street people, the merchants, what they would like to see with this festival, to see if they can help out, to see if we can do something that would benefit them, knowing that it was a pretty rough year for everybody. So I just wanted to make sure. We've also invited them to come Wednesday, May the 15th, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, or on Thursday in the evening from 5 to 7. They can drop in. They can also get a hold of Sherry or Marla and let us know if they have any really good ideas or any concerns, and we would kick off our Main Street then. It seems like a good time in the middle of the summer, and we'll get at her then. The dates are Wednesday, May 15th. It doesn't say when it is. I'm not sure.
Yes, it's Friday, July 26th and Saturday the 27th. Also, just to add to that, it wasn't included in the letter, but with the Battle of Georgian Bay, sorry if I may, a representative from Discovery Harbor is going to attend as well to talk about that event and the potential impacts.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief one from the Centennial Museum here in town. There is a second evening escape room challenge, May 10th, Friday night, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. They had a wait list, but there is some spaces left if you want to get into that event. Check out the Centennial Museum's website or go right down there. I think it's $25, and it should be a fun night.
Thank you, Worship. This is an inquiry for Councillor Clue. I understand this past weekend that her and her family were out on one of our trails doing a little bit of litter pickup. And as an avid litter picker myself, I was quite encouraged to hear about this. And I was wondering if Councillor Clue could elaborate a little bit on her and her family's efforts.
Thank you for that. Through your worship. We started at the Overhead Bridge Trail, the Bridges Trail, just on the town limit side and went right to Terry Street Park, the Parkette. We picked up 2.5 large 50-gallon bags, I think they are. And realizing when we got to the park, we didn't know how to bring them back home. I quickly sent Sherry an email, and she had our staff pick it up at the Parkette there. So happy to have a conduit to get that garbage picked up, but there was quite a lot. And unfortunately, with all the leaf cover, there's, I'm sure, a ton of garbage more hiding under the surface.
Just to add on to that, Your Worship, day before, going down our road, we had 2 young students, probably I'd say 13-year-olds, and one on each side of the road picking up. And on my way to council tonight, somebody was doing the Heinsohn Road back to the waterworks section, and they were like right down in the ditch water. They had hip waders on, and this lady was chugging stuff out. So it's good to see that that's happening very regularly now.
Yeah. Actually, our recreation director, Sherry, was there something just recently that has been worked out with Roy and the schools or the school children in regards to litter pickup?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't have the exact details, but I do understand that our facilities manager collaborates with the school each year to organize some pitch-in for pitch-in week, and the schools participate in some garbage pickup as well.
Very good, thank you. And CAO, do you have something to report vis-a-vis the staff?
Through Your Worship, thank you. Last year, staff initiated kind of an internal, I don't know if we can call it a challenge, but where we provided some opportunities for staff to engage and get out on Earth Day for say an hour during the workday to help pitch in throughout the community. With Earth Day falling on Easter Monday this year, that didn't take place, but certainly something that we want to continue and maintain the momentum with moving forward. And in the absence of Earth Day this year falling on a regular business day, perhaps we'll explore in the coming weeks an alternative day to get out and pitch into the community.
Thank you. Very good. Any further announcements or inquiries? There being none, we will go to the confirmation bylaw, and it is moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Vadeboncoeur that the confirmation bylaw 2019-33 be signed, sealed by the mayor and clerk. All in favor? Thank you. Mover and a seconder to adjourn. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Sinema. All in favor? Regular council meeting is adjourned, and we will. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break before we proceed into our committee of the whole meeting. Okay, members of council, we will now get underway with our Committee of the Whole meeting and call to order. Approval of the agenda of Committee of the Whole, April 24, 2019. Recommended action that the Committee of the Whole agenda for April 24, 2019 be approved as presented. Mover, Councillor Mayotte, seconder, Councillor Valle-Boncoeur, are all in favor. Declaration of pecuniary interest as stated, declare or at the proper time. Yes, Councillor.
I do have a declaration from pecuniary interest.
Okay.
Okay. So, do you want me to read it to you?
I would like you to state it, yes.
Okay. In regards to agenda item, the Committee of the Whole 4A and 8B, planning application for 1145 Fuller Avenue. It shows as 145 on, so it's a typo error. I, Jill Santamont, declare a pecuniary interest on the above noted matter for the following reason. I live directly across the road from the subject property and believe the approval and development could affect the value of our property as proposed.
Okay, thank you. So carrying on from there, we have presentations and delegations, and the delegation from Darren Vella, planning application for 145 Fuller Avenue. So Darren, if you will.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Darren Vella. I am a planner with Innovative Planning Solutions based out of Barrie. I do recognize some members of council. We've been here before on behalf of Mr. Wright. And I'm here to speak to you relative to the report that Ms. Beattie has prepared relative to our application. So why I'm here, why Mr. Wright is instructing me to come here this evening is we're hoping that there's a different alternative that would result in Mr. Wright not losing roughly 5 to 6 months of time if you were to go with Ms. Beattie's recommendation as it sits in her planning report. We're really talking about that much of a delay relative to going through the planning process. As I'm sure council is aware, planning applications are not dealt with very quickly. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into evaluating the applications. Mr. Wright has been trying to develop this land since 2007, for example. So this isn't his first presentation in front of council. We've been here numerous times before trying to work through the process. And we just feel that there is an opportunity, given the limited amount of information that is still outstanding relative to processing this application, that there's a way to provide that information to you as we go through the process. So I just want to highlight some things for council's consideration. I did provide a memo, which I believe was provided to you on desk. So it does identify some of the concerns that I saw in reading Ms. Beattie's report, and I just want to go through them with you. So the first thing, Your Worship, is the position of Ms. Beattie is that she wants the planning application returned to Mr. Wright, so removed out of the planning department's office until such time as some additional environmental work is completed. So environmental work is very seasonal in nature, and based on the pre-consult that we completed with Ms. Beattie in September of 2018, and the time in which the application was submitted, which was in February of this year, there are, for example, bird species that you cannot visit the property and look for until they're actually inhabiting the property. So to sum it up, there are 3 very small outstanding issues relative to our environmental impact study. Based on our environmental consultant, that work will be completed in mid-July. So the updated report will be fully submitted, satisfactory to Ms. Beattie's review and your peer review consultant's review by mid-July. So if we look at mid-July, I believe council is on summer recess at that point. So we're not in a position, or Ms. Beattie would not be in a position to bring a report back to you until you resume council, which would be in the fall. She would then be deeming the application complete, and we would then be only beginning the process relative to engaging the public, which is a very important component of the application, getting the public feedback, going through circulation with your internal departments, as well as your external circulation with Severn Sound and other Ministry of Natural Resources, etc. So we're really stuck relative to this time, and we feel that between now and July, if council does consider to move in a different direction, not that the information is not going to be provided to council before you make a decision, that will absolutely happen, but we feel that it would benefit the process to begin the public meeting process with the neighborhood for a third time through the summer months, not the winter months, because we think that that public meeting will be better attended through the summer months versus in the winter. So we want to begin that process, and we also want to begin the process of, for example, having your staff review the traffic studies, the geotechnical reports, the functional servicing reports, the stormwater management reports. There's a total of 7 reports that we submitted as part of this application submission into your planning department. So the environmental piece is, yes, and important, but it is only a component of what we are submitting to you in terms of completing a fulsome review and making sure that that review has been cleared off by all of your departments before there's a recommendation report brought back to you. So there's some reference in Ms. Beattie's letter about the new Planning Act timelines. So there are new timelines relative to the ability for council to make decisions within a more regimented timeline. And what I've tried to do is, in the package that I provided after our letter, there's actually a redacted version of a letter. It's got some blacked out sections. And I just thought it was important for council to look at this letter, because what's happening in a lot of other municipalities is the municipalities want to continue to cooperate with applicants, work cooperatively with developers, and ensure that things happen in a timely fashion. So this letter here is an example of a file that we're working on in the city of Barrie. And what the city of Barrie asked the applicant to do in cases where we know that the timeline is not going to be reached, so the 6-month timeline is not enough time to process the file, we may need 8 months, for example, to deal with a particular situation, is that we write a letter of consent, which is provided to the municipality, which says, we agree as the applicant that we're not going to appeal this application, to provide more time to cooperate with the municipality to resolve whatever outstanding issues exist. We ourselves as the applicant, we don't want to end up in the new OMB process. I don't think that benefits anybody. It doesn't benefit the applicant, it doesn't benefit the municipality. We're wasting time, we're wasting money, we're taking the decision out of your hands. We would rather have a decision made by the people that live within the community, because this development is within your municipality. So we think that's important. So this letter provides an example of how the process could continue so that we're not going to lose 5 to 6 months of time. Ensure that Ms. Beattie has got the parameters through which she's not worried about an appeal, and I can stand here before you and say, we're definitely not interested in appealing. We've been down that road previously on this exact property, and it's been 13 years. So we don't want to go there again. There was a lot of things that happened, not with the municipality, but with the county and the province, which forced us to go in that direction. So the information that Ms. Beatty is asking for in all of the municipalities that I'm currently doing work in, it is not uncommon that that work is submitted as addendum reports through an application process. If we know that it's going to take 6 to 8 months to complete a planning process, and that there's some additional information that's coming within the next 45 to 60 days, that is a sufficient window through which other things can be undertaken through that application, and we're working cooperatively to try and achieve the best project for the community. So that's really what we're here to ask you to consider, Your Worship. I don't know if there's an opportunity for questions to come back on this matter, because I know I'm only here as a delegation request, but if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Bella. I believe that we will probably be dealing with it a little later in the agenda, and I'm sure that we, as members of council, will probably want to hear our own planners, and so under the planning section, chaired by Deputy Mayor Dubois, it will be brought forward. And just to, for your own information, Mr. Bella, it's not Miss Beatty, it's Miss Betty.
She's never corrected me before. Sorry about that.
Could I just make one comment?
Yeah.
I just wanted to refer you to your comment that you made about July. I know we don't have scheduled meetings, but we're not adverse to meeting if we need to. So I just wanted to make that clear. If there's a good reason to have a meeting, certainly His Worship and the CAO would absolutely call a meeting.
Just
So,
for one matter?
yes.
That's great.
If that is what would have to happen, we're certainly up for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if we feel the need is there, then I, as the mayor and the CAO, are able to do that. Call
Thank
a
you for
special
that.
meeting. Okay. So, Councillor Wedepunker.
Thank you, Worship. If questions should arise of the deputant later, are we able to ask questions then, or is this our only opportunity to ask questions of the delegate?
No, you will be able to ask questions then when we've heard our own planner. After we've heard our own planner, then it'll be open to members of council to question either Mr. Vella or Andrea.
Thank you.
Moving on to the council information package. Council information package, April 17, 2019. Recommended action that the council information package for April 17, 2019, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Are there any, yes, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Your Worship, I like the Georgian Bay General Hospital penitentiary dialysis update. I think it's very important. I'm not positive that all that information has gotten out to the public. So I would ask our clerk to...
I was attended at the audit and finance, and the report was there, so.
Well, perhaps, do we need to read the letter, or could you just perhaps comment on the highlights? Dialysis is not leaving our community. I think that's...
It is leaving our community, but
Well-
it's not going to Aurelia.
It's not going far.
Yeah, it's difficult to say, because at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting, it was brought forward what the intentions and plans are. Yet we were kind of told keep it under the low key until it was publicly announced, and I'm not sure that it has been yet publicly announced. So if that is the case, then and yet they're saying at that meeting that probably everybody in Penetanguishene and Midland know about it by now. So.
Through your worship, maybe I can just provide a little bit of clarity and summarize what the letter says, if that's an appetite. Basically, the hospital put together a steering committee that looked at two different sites to be considered. One of them was which they ended up narrowing it down to, is a site in Midland. And essentially, the steering committee has endorsed this particular site in Midland, across from Boston Pizza in that little plaza. And at this time, that proposed permanent site is going to go through a 120-day consultation period, of which case the ministry has the final approval, but that's what the steering committee has recommended. They did have quite a criteria that the sites had to go through in terms of consultation and ticking the boxes. And I think it's somewhat of a good news story that it is staying as close to Penetanguishene as it is, recognizing that there could have been alternatives that weren't certainly weren't as close to Penetanguishene as that site is. So although it is leaving the town of Penetanguishene, it is not far down the road, and certainly will meet the needs of that service for years to come.
I might point out, Mr. CAO, that probably improved as well, because there is some talk also that there will be a rough-in done to accommodate an extra 3 chairs in the future over and above what we now have. So that's also a good news story.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also would like to pull letter number 9, which is sidewalks on John Street. And
Sorry, just for clarity, when we wanted to have a discussion about these items, it's perfectly fine for us to have them in this area. If it's something that a council member wants to have a full discussion with a motion and actually make it a specific item, is when we'll pull it and add it to that specific area, like we did with Councillor Sandoval the last time, but it didn't materialize into anything. But if it's a matter of just making mention of something or reiterating something on that item, it's perfectly fine that we do it in that way. So just for clarification.
thank you. I just wanted to bring it forward and ask that I don't think it's on our 10-year capital plan, but maybe some consideration could be given to it. It's a very unsafe situation. There are 2 bus stops up there now, and children are everywhere at certain hours of the day. So I just wanted to get it on the radar. Thank you.
Mr. CAO, you have a comment?
Through you, Your Worship, thank you. The Director of Public Works and I did have a quick conversation about this back the second week in April when this letter came to our attention. The Deputy Mayor is correct. It's not on our 10-year capital plan currently, but Brian has confirmed that he will be adding it to a listing of.
Anything further to be pulled from the council information package? There being none, I would call for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Mayette and Councillor Levy, all in favor. Thank you. Moving on to Section A, Transportation and Environmental Services, and I pass it to Councillor Mayette.
I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Levy in case I get a coughing fit or something. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Transportation and Environment Services. The consent agenda consists of the Midland Penetang Transit Ridership Monthly Update and Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Does anyone want either of these 2 items pulled for discussion? Seeing none, mover. Councillor LaRose, seconded by Councillor Vadabancourt. All those in favor? And carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to matters for consideration. Level of service snow removal policy. Update 2019, RDS 2019-12. Recommended action that Council approves the level of service snow removal policy as outlined within the staff report. Has anyone got any questions or comments for our Director? Councillor Vadabancourt.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. I did have a question with respect to one of the service level changes that are being proposed in the report, and this specifically has to do with Robert Street East from Fox Street to Thompson Road. It's being added as a secondary area. My only concern is with respect to the last sentence on that, for that stretch of road. It says that the snow in this area will be removed from both sides of the road, north and south. And what struck me as odd with this is that for a good portion of that road on the south side, especially from Lorne Avenue to Dunlop, all those lots back onto Robert Street East. There is a sidewalk there, but they all back on. There's not driveways. And then the section from Dufferin to Thompson on the south side is all bush. So it just struck me as odd that we would be advocating for snow removal on the south side of the road. And so I did ask the CAO that question prior to the agenda, so I think the director may have a response for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Vadabancourt. The reasoning behind the snow removal or the change in level of service for that particular section of Robert Street East has been brought up by our road supervisor. There has been not necessarily the number of driveways through that section, but we have run into drainage issues where the height of the snowbanks has blocked or impeded drainage during some melts during the winter season. So we are looking at bumping that area up to a secondary area so that we can actually remove some snow to let some of the stormwater get to where it needs to go. We've had actually to do that a few times this year without it being in our level of service policy, just for flooding concerns.
Does that take care of that one?
Thank you. Just if I may, just a point of clarification. So just in terms of observation, particularly from the section of Robert Street East from Dufferin to Thompson, I've seen the snowbanks push back into the bush. I haven't actually seen them removed. Removed means to me that they're kind of, the snowbanks are trucked away. So are we talking actual removal, or are we talking about pushing it back into the bush?
It would be more pushing it back into the bush to actually allow it to have a ditch to flow into. In certain areas where we've had to actually remove snow to cut holes into banks to allow the water to get by, so it would be a combination of both.
Thank you.
And Councillor LaRose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on that note, Brian, why are we upgrading that to a secondary road when we could just continue to do it on an as-needed basis? Once we commit to this in our policy, somebody's going to go across and say, well, the snowbank has now reached the maximum of 36 inches. You guys are going to be required. So here we have roads that are used a lot more, like our main street, and they don't get cleaned until they reach the specific height. I would rather see us just have that as an area of concern and clean it on an as-needed basis, as opposed to having that directly made into a secondary road.
Thank you, through Madam Chair, to Councillor LaRose. The secondary plan area is the lowest priority rating, and it doesn't have a snowbank height restriction like a critical area such as the Main Street has. The reasoning for adding it to the policy is so that we don't lose sight of those areas. It's actually a reminder for our operators to go in and clear these areas, particularly when it becomes apparent that there's a melt in the forecast. The secondary plan areas are the third lowest ranking. We have the critical and the primary, and then the secondary areas. And the secondary areas are cleared on an as-needed and a priority basis after the primary and the critical areas are. So it's not going to change necessarily the frequency that we do remove snow in these areas. It's just going to add a reminder to our operators that these areas do need to be removed, especially when it comes to snow melting periods that we're getting more frequently these days in the January, February months to address flooding concerns.
Any other questions? Seeing none. I didn't ask for a mover. Councillor Rose, and seconded by Councillor Sainamont. All those in favor? And carried. Thank you very much. Referrals to upcoming agendas, staff. We have the Thompson Road West Extension. Does anyone have another item they wish to add to this section? Okay, I do. Oops. Councillor Vadabancourt.
Just following up on the clerk's advice with respect to that letter dealing with the sidewalk on John Street, should that be added to this particular section, Madam Clerk?
Certainly, if committee deems it worthy of a staff report, that would be the proper way to go forward. I'm hearing from my CAO that it will be coming forward through the budget process.
Your worship, I'm satisfied with that.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Cummings?
Sorry. I'm trying to back you up a little bit. On your consent agenda, you missed item number 2, infrastructure.
Investigating in Canada. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cummings. Investigating Canada Infrastructure Program. Brian, are you going to speak to that, or is the clerk?
Sorry. No, actually, nothing was missed. I think those items are there to be received for information. They're received in one motion. Perfectly fine.
Yeah. Thank you. So I wasn't wrong. I'd like to add an item, if I may, as chair. I guess I can. I think it's time for us to start looking at, more seriously, at a secondary water source for the town of Penetanguishene. We can certainly never count on the Robert Street West wells coming back. It's been fairly front and center for many, many years that we rely on one source of water, and if there were to be a disaster, we have no backup. Also, many years ago, we looked quite diligently at the possibility of connecting with Midland water supply, which entails 1.2 kilometers of pipe along Fuller Avenue to the Sunnyside area. I'd like to restart those discussions because after reviewing all the reports going back to 2008, 2003, something like that, it came to my attention again that when it was turned down by Midland, it was turned down based on inaccurate information and due to our water storage capacities, which they didn't have the latest info on. So I would like to see a committee struck and have some discussions at the very highest levels between the two towns to see where that would lead us. There has been some informal discussion. I know Mayor Strathen has been fully briefed, and I've met with CAO Lees on the issue and compiled him a nice handy little history of that particular issue. So I'm wondering if we could put that on the consent agenda with the idea that it not sit for months and months and months. I'd like to see some, since it's top of mind for people in Midland and hopefully Penetanguishene right now, hoping we can move forward on the compiling, gathering, and understanding all the accurate information. Thank you. CAO?
Through Madam Chair, just a couple comments, and then perhaps we can just clarify what the kind of the goal and objective or key deliverable is that you're looking at. And I'll just provide committee a brief update. This has been kind of a topic of conversation on a few occasions. Certainly in my 3 years here, Brian and I have had a few conversations about it. In early March, I had some very high-level conversations with Midland CAO. And as recent as this morning at 11 o'clock, town staff here at Penetanguishene met with the town of Midland staff to discuss this very item. So I think the update for committee is Midland is going through a water master plan process. They've asked, as they do through the process, for feedback and commentary from the town of Penetanguishene, particularly resulting from one of our residents' inquiries with Mayor Strathern over in Midland. And so you will see a letter on a future COW agenda identifying kind of what the process is that we're looking to follow, and that is to engage their consultant through the their water master plan process to do some initial analysis and modeling to address or refer to the feasibility of such a project. So I guess what I'm saying is I think it would be good if it's the will of committee to add a referral item we can massage the key deliverable a little bit in terms of how committee would like to see that. And then we can, Brian and I can have some conversation around what that timing looks like. But I think the ball has started to be advanced down the field in terms of feasibility and, looking at some of the engineering and logistics at a very high level without us engaging a consultant. It would be done through their process that they're undertaking currently. So,
Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. I didn't know that was happening today, so it's great news, very timely. What do we do to get something? Stacy?
Just for clarity, in terms of what you would like to have it called, I have a secondary water source as the item, options, and then key deliverables being options for additional water source and potential partnerships with the town of Midland, as well as an ad hoc committee. Those would
Just forget the ad hoc committee for now. I think Jeff's got a good handle on collaborating with Midland, and we'll let them go at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in terms of actually adding that to the item, we have it here, and obviously you need to, you could be the mover, you need a seconder, and for the motion to carry for that to be added.
Okay, I'll move that, and Councillor LaRose will second it. All those in favor? And carried. Thank you very much. Question period from the media and the public? Seeing none, I will hand this back to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. We will move on to 7, Section B, Recreation and Community Services, and I pass it to Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Your Worship. 7A, we have our consent agenda, and it is our Winterama 2019 post-event report. If we have a mover and a seconder for that, moved by Councillor Sanama, seconded by Councillor Vadaboncourt. Is there any questions, or I'm sure everybody's read it, and we'll go from there. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving down to 7B, we have matters for consideration. It is our 2017 Arena Building Condition Assessment Report, and as I know most of you have looked up, this is quite a lengthy report, quite a well-done report. It does put council on notice a little bit of where we are at and what we need to do. So I'm going to ask Sherry if she wants to walk us through the highlights of our options. I don't think we need to go all the way through options A to F, but we can do the first few options.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor LaRose. So for those members of council that were here in the previous term, we had a building condition assessment done on the arena, and it was brought forward to council. We seek direction to just update the capital plan with the recommendations contained within, and it was referred back to staff. We were asked to look into doing something similar to what our neighbors at Oro Medonte had done, and they had closed their facility to do a one-time massive retrofit to make it a little more functional and do the repairs all at one time. There was also some talk at the time of a potential funding announcement, and we were asked to look into that as well. So this is a follow-up report about that. We've met with, we visited the Oro facility and met with their staff there, and essentially with their visit of their retrofit of their current facility, municipalities that we look at who are replacing their current facilities or building new arenas or multi-use recreation centers, they all start with a feasibility study. The other thing that's not been before this term of council to consider is the recommendation within our rec master plan. And it suggests that the municipality, considering the age of the current arena and the age of the curling club, that looking ahead, potentially both of those facilities would need to be replaced, and that there would be some operational efficiencies, suggesting that a new facility to replace both should be considered through a feasibility study. There's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle, a lot of different decisions to be made, and factors that would influence the best decision moving forward. So what we're suggesting is that we put out an RFP and ask consultants to put a plan together as to how the town best handle all of these pieces, do public consultation, look at site selection, look at potential funding partners, and bring a recommendation back to council for award of that RFP. So under the procurement policy, the CAO can authorize an expense up to $100,000, but given the importance of these decisions, we want to bring that back to council to make some decisions. So that is ultimately what we're recommending.
So, thank you, Sherry. So in a nutshell, what it is, if we were going to look at doing a retrofit of our arena, putting an addition on, doing some upgrades. So the first question became, is the arena okay to do that with? Or is it too old? So that is the process that we're asking tonight, is to have our structural guys come and say, if you do, you know, if you want to add on, you can add on and the building's good for another 20, 25 years. Or they're going to come back and say, it has a shelf life of 7 or 8 years, so there's no use us dumping millions of dollars in, and then we would proceed a different way. So as Sherry so eloquently put it, that puts us in the place of either a retrofit or a replacement. So we need to start in the beginning before we can head down that road, and it will be it'll be a long process. So with that, we open it up to any questions. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All nice and said, spending $100,000 for somebody to give us an idea of what to do. My concern is, what's going to happen with this government in the fall? We know they're trying to downsize Simcoe County. Does that mean we're going to be amalgamating? If we're amalgamating, does that become the problem of the other people that are around us? Do they have to put money into it? Maybe we can get some more money out of Tiny? I don't know. Like I'm worried right now to spend that kind of money, and then all of a sudden the provincial government step in and does force us to amalgamate with the other municipalities. I think that's money wasted. I don't know if we can wait. Like, how long have we been waiting? 5 years, 4 years for this? Can we wait maybe another 6 months, 8 months to see what this provincial government is going to actually do with these small municipalities? And if we do amalgamate, we might get lucky. It'll be the expense of other people to have a second good arena. I don't know if I can put this into a motion that we postpone it for another 6 to 8 months to see what's going to happen with the provincial government.
Councillor Sanama?
Just a point being that we're not asking for hundreds of thousands, like $100,000 right now. Right now, we're looking to do $12,000 to see if the curling club and the community center are structurally sound. And that, I mean, that's a step that's going to have to be taken at some point in the immediate future anyway, no matter which way we go. And the request for the RFP is not going to cost us any money right now. It's just putting it out there to come up with some ideas, but there's no cost associated with the RFP. This is something to consider.
Councillor Mayette?
I understand what you're coming for, Councillor Sanama, is it's 12 grand just to get an ideal going, but how can you get an ideal going to build up on it when the provincial government comes in and says, this is what's going to happen with your county, Simcoe County, or with your municipality? So,
Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just provide a couple points of clarification. So the first part of the motion talks about the $12,000 for the structural assessments. It's been 7 years since those structural assessments are done. Best practice in the industry is to do them every 5 years. So I think from staff's perspective, it's really a need, whether that facility is owned by the town of Penetanguishene or whether that facility is owned and operated by another municipality that perhaps isn't the town of Penetanguishene moving forward. The second, or I should say the third part of the motion talks about releasing an RFP to address the needs assessment and feasibility study as outlined in option A. That, our intent here is to release an RFP, get the ball rolling with an RFP, state our problem to potential proponents, and have them come back with some potential solutions. all while recognizing, and I think Councillor Mayotte's point is a good point. It's a point, very, very valid point, in that our intention is not to award an RFP before we understand what's going on with the provincial government. But I think in the essence of time and kind of the approach we've taken with a number of other projects, be it strategic plan is a good example, is continue plugging forward as best as we can. But I think in this particular situation, staff would not be coming back to council asking for an award of an RFP in advance of knowing what's going on with the RGR or the regional government review. So I think from our perspective, it's really just some staff time and frankly not a whole lot, because I think we're going to beg, borrow, and steal from other municipalities to release an RFP and get the ball rolling to at least get an idea what we might be faced with in the event that we are free and clear and post-October, November, the town of Penetanguishene does exist as the town of Penetanguishene. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity. No financial obligations at this point. We'd be looking to come back to council post the results of the RGR with some recommendations after consulting with our evaluation committee, which will consist of the chair and co-chair of Recreation and Community Services. Hopefully that provides just a little bit of context and clarity. I think Councillor Mayotte's points are valid and well-made points. Certainly points that we have considered kind of throughout the process and certainly in discussion and consultation with our chair and co-chair of Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Anybody else? Councillor Badabancourt.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Like yourself, I thought it was a very well done report. There's lots of information in here. I certainly support the recommendations as you've outlined. I just want to understand the timing of the release of the RFP under that third paragraph in the motion. Is that released simultaneously with respect to the structural assessment, or is it done after we've received the structural assessment report?
We had a section meeting on Tuesday, and when we looked at it, we had the same basic question. There's no use having somebody say you can build on and then say, oh, you never had a structural assessment of the building to say it's okay to build on. So we would anticipate that the structural work would all be done on both buildings, and we would be able to have that report, and then that report would make up part of the RFP that we send out.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other questions on that? Councillor Mayotte, are you okay with that, or were you going to make a motion?
I'm happy with that. I just don't want to make sure that I prefer to have a brand new arena than rebuilding on top of it, but I still want to see what's going to happen. If we can get money from the other municipalities, we'll build brand new. I'm in full support for that, but if it's just the $12,000 per now, we got no problems with it, but definitely wait for the provincial government.
And just for your information, because this is due to new development, 90% of that $12,000 is going to come from DCs, and the other 10% is coming from the gas tax money that we received a little while ago. So there will be no impact on this year's budget. With that being said, I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Levy, seconded by Councillor Sanama. All in favor? And that is carried.
Sorry, sorry for the interruption. I just don't think we actually read the motion in terms of getting the mover and seconder. Just wanting to make sure that committee is happy with what they're moving and seconding.
Would you like the whole motion read? Mm-hmm. We can. 27 Arena Building Condition Assessment Report 2, recommended action that the structural assessments be completed on the Penetanguishene Memorial Community Center and the Penetanguishene Curling Club and be funded up to $12,000 plus HST from the additional one-time federal gas tax funds to be received in 2019, and that the results of the building condition assessment be considered in the future capital planning to ensure the ongoing viability of the Penetanguishene Memorial Community Center. And further, that the request for proposal be released by the town for a needs assessment study and feasibility study as outlined in option A. And finally, that the staff report back to council with recommendation for project award and funding approvals. Do we want us to redo the vote? All
I
right.
have moved by Councillor Levy, seconded by Councillor Sanama.
Correct. There you go. Moving down to C, referrals to upcoming agenda. Does anybody have any to take off or add? Do we want to leave our follow-up to the building condition assessment till later? We'll leave that fly for a little bit, I think, yeah. If everybody is okay with that, we will move to question period from the media in public. Seeing none, Mr. Mayor, back to you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Rose, and we will move on to...
Did we forget?
Sorry, just mover and seconder for those current items. I know you didn't add or remove anything, but we just standard.
So the clerk wants us to have a mover and a seconder. So moved by Councillor Sanama, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo, that the, what are we calling them? Referrals to upcoming agendas be received or stayed the same as they are. All in favor? And that is carried.
Okay, Councillor Rose, thank you. We move on to Section 8C, Planning and Community Development Services, and I pass it on to Deputy Mayor Dubo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under consent agenda, we have one item, the award of requests for proposal for our comprehensive zoning bylaw review project. We did have several groups that came in and reviewed. We did review several, and we came up with the Meridian, I do believe it is, and hopefully we're going to start that process soon. Is there any other questions? I need a mover and a seconder for acceptance. Councillor Clue and Councillor LaRose, all those in favor? Carried. Our next item is 8.B. And before we get into this, I would ask our planner perhaps to come forward and maybe comment on the deputation that was made. And certainly it's, we have a lot of reports that were circulated and part of our agenda. So there will be an opportunity for questions and clarifications if necessary. So I would ask the planner to speak to the recommended action and the deputation that was brought forward. Andrea?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor and members of council. You do have a very detailed staff report that was provided as part of the agenda. I'm hoping you've all had a chance to read it. I think my professional recommendations are contained within that report. I do just want to reiterate itself that it is my recommendation that these applications be deemed complete. In my opinion, I don't believe the environmental work that's left outstanding on this project are insignificant or minor. I do believe they're critical work that really needs to happen in order for the town and the public to have a good idea of the impacts of this development may have on natural heritage features. And I just want to note that this position is supported by the policies of our official plan that clearly states that an environmental impact study needs to be completed and accepted by the municipality prior to further consideration of development applications. Although I can appreciate that this property has a significant history with respect to the environmental work that was done, that environmental work goes back several years, and the environmental system in that area is dynamic and changes. And that doesn't preclude the fact that policies and legislations have changed in those 12 intervening years. So I just wanted to reiterate that this is supported position by myself on the policies of our official plan. Note that their development consultant or their environmental consultant has clearly said that there is work that needs to be done that they haven't had a chance to do because of the timing in which they were retained, and that to really understand the impacts this development may have on the natural environment, this work needs to be done. So for the public and the council's benefit, I think it's prudent that we deem this application incomplete, and so that we can get that understanding of what's happening on that property with respect to the natural environment.
Thank you, Andrea. Council, I know when Mr. Vella did make his presentation, we said there'd be an opportunity for questions, and if there are questions, now's the time. Councillor Vadabonker, you indicated you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. My question has to do with the addendum report and the additional work that was outlined to be done. So could you just clarify the scope of the work remaining to be done, and just confirm that a contract has been let with this firm to undertake this work?
Through Deputy Mayor Dubois to the councillor, yes. So our environmental consultant is Burke's Environmental. They have been contracted to complete the remaining portion of the work. The work that is outstanding relates to identifying species at risk. It is not related to establishing what the development limits of the property are. What I did in my memo was I included in the last 2 pages the concept plan. The last page is the concept plan that was approved by the OMB in 2015. So that is still very recent. That was only 4 years ago. So that is the concept plan that was approved, which designated the development area and then designated the wetland area. And then the page before that is the concept plan that has been submitted as part of this next round of submissions. And as you will see, the development boundary is exactly the same. It hasn't changed. That line has been approved by the Ministry of Natural Resources. What we're doing through this additional work is we're looking for what's called a whippoorwill bird. If the birds are nesting in that area, it doesn't mean that that area cannot be developed. It means we have to find another location to provide another suitable nesting habitat for that species. So the work that's going to be done is not going to change the development limits that are being proposed under the application.
Hey, just a supplement. So just so it's clear for me that you're just looking for the presence of this particular bird in this area. That's the only aspect that's remaining with respect to the work that needs to be done?
If I can just check my email, I don't want to pull up my phone, but I did get a specific email from the consultant this morning because I figured that council was going to ask this question. So yes, the whippoorwill survey will take place May 18th. And then the second whippoorwill survey will take place on June 12th and June 13th. And then the report will be prepared by middle of July.
Thank you.
I see our planner would like to comment to that. Andrea?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I do just want to add to Darren's comments. We do have correspondence from the Ministry of Natural Environment that they're requesting or have indicated that there should be some additional species at risk studies that should be done. That includes the habitat for the blanding turtle, potential habitat for species at risk, endangered bats, the whippoorwill, as Mr. Vella has indicated. And with respect to the wetland boundary, they've also requested that wetland boundary be confirmed as being appropriate. As I indicated, that the boundary is dynamic and can change with the passage of time. So they've suggested that that needs to be confirmed and approved by the ministry, regardless of the approval that was given in 2012.
Thank you, Andrea. And if I may ask a question, if all of that, those items of request got in place in June sometime, could this come before council sometime in July? Is that possible?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm at the will of council here whenever you would, whenever this additional information is ready and is can come forward to council. I'm more than happy to work with council on another meeting date to look at the applications at that point.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Levy?
I would suggest that we cannot take this to the public consultation level with our residents without having all the answers. That makes no sense to me for them to be consulting on something that they don't have all the information on, any more than it makes sense for us to move it forward without all this information. I think both parties, the town and the developer, could find a position where somehow they convince their environmentalist consults to speed up a bit and to get the report in a more timely manner than waiting 2 months, and that we schedule a meeting as soon as we can to accommodate the developer's wishes. So I think we can, if with a bit of movement, we can follow the rules, accept our planner's advice, and see where that takes us.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Clue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually was just going to echo the same comments Councillor Levy just made, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor LaRose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, what are the ramifications? Mr. Vella just indicated that if the, I forget the specific bird, whippoorwill, that they would have to find an area for it. With the other things that we're requesting, what would be, like what would hold up the whole show here? Like you mentioned, Andrea mentioned a bat, something else, I forget what it was. But what would be the ramifications of those things? Would they hold up the development? Would they change the lot sizes? What would it do?
Andrea, if you could answer that, and then Mr. Vella.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Councillor LaRose. So that is actually under the Endangered Species Act, and so I can't really speak specific to what are the ramifications for that. What I can speak to is that the Endangered Species Act is clear that the legal test for when you have habitat of endangered species or species at risk in there, there's a couple tests that the proponent needs to demonstrate, and that test doesn't first jump to the destruction of that habitat. The legal tests actually come in to say that they must prove that there is avoidance of that habitat, should there be any present. The next, how could they mitigate any of that habitat loss? And the last step is actually the permit to apply to destroy the habitat to the minister itself. So there are some significant ramifications that should this habitat be identified on the site itself, that they would need to take through the ministry level. So I think that's why it's important that we know what's there to understand if they can avoid it before giving council any further decision with respect to the development.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes.
Just a supplemental to that, I was under the impression that this application went to the OMB a number of years ago, and the lot lines that were provided to us tonight are the agreed upon lines. So I'm having a little hard time, because as we know, how I don't like studies about a whole bunch of stuff. We've asked this person to go do a study, and 48 months have gone by, and now all of a sudden that study's no good. I don't understand what has changed in 48 months.
Well, I think some of the studies were done in 2007, so that's a long time. Things change in that many years.
Deputy
Mr.
Mayor,
Vella?
can I speak, please? Because
Yes.
your planner's information is completely incorrect.
Oh, easy now, sir.
No,
on that.
but I'm just, with all due respect, facts are facts. Her scenario would be correct if this land wasn't already designated for development. So if we were looking at an official plan change where we were converting these lands to a development designation, then she is 1,000% correct. But when you're dealing with a situation where the principle of development has already been established, so in your official plan, these lands are designated as neighborhood residential, which means the intent of these lands is to build urban development on them. The test of avoidance is not weighted as high as if we were looking at these lands in a raw state. So that is a very important distinction. No disrespect to your planner, but that is a very important consideration that council should be made aware of before making a decision. And then the only other thing that I'd like to say is, I think what we're asking from council is not to take this application to the public prior to the report being produced in the middle of July. We agree that a public meeting could be scheduled the end of July or even in August. What we're saying is between now and July, we would like the other technical reports peer-reviewed and analyzed. As I mentioned, there's a traffic study, there's a functional servicing report, there's a stormwater management report. There's lots of work to keep us busy on this file, to keep us moving forward while this other work is being completed. Thank you.
Yes, and I would just reaffirm that we're not questioning that the land is not designed for residential development. I think that's absolutely correct. It is designated. It's just other issues in reference to the development that needs to take place. And I agree that we need to have all our ducks in a row and everything laid out before we go to the public. So, Council, yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question comes back to, okay, Mr. Vella has pointed out that the whippoorwill study being done by Burke's Environmental would be completed by mid-May and mid-June. Now, the other question is that under the Endangered Species Act that our planner has brought forward, is that who would do this study and when?
Andrea, if you could answer that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Mayor LaRue. So Burke's Natural Heritage would be responsible for preparing that investigation and based on their field work itself. So with that, a report would come into the municipality and we would have it peer reviewed by our own consultants on that. But through the circulation process, that would be also given to the ministry now responsible for species at risk, which I understand is no longer the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. It's now the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So there's been some change at the ministry who takes care of what. So they would have an opportunity as a commenting agency to review those reports and studies and make comments on that.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Councillor LaRose.
What's the downside if they do their technical review, if they do their traffic study? Is that on our dime or is that on their dime?
I do believe it's on their dime.
What would be wrong with them proceeding with that?
Well, I do believe that they can proceed with those things, can they not?
Mr. Vella indicated during his opening remarks that they could not do that. Was I hearing that correct? I'm saying, what's the problem? I mean, if they want to pay for a traffic study while they're waiting and get that stuff going and see which way the sewers are running, what do we care?
Andrea.
Thank you very much through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor LaRose. So they have done that traffic study. There was a number of studies that have been completed in support of their application that are referenced in the staff report. I believe, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Vella, I think what he was hoping could happen in the meantime is that we conduct an internal and peer review of some of those supporting documentations so as not to wait until September or however, whenever that next consideration of the completeness of the application could occur. So that work has been done and it's been submitted to the town.
Yes, Councillor Vadabonker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I appreciate the staff report outlining options. There were 3 options provided in the staff report, and staff are recommending option 1. I understand why option 2, based on your answers to the questions, why that's not being considered. But could you help me understand why option 3 wasn't looked at? Because I think it covers a lot of what we've talked about, but it doesn't capture everything. But there's no real explanation other than we want to go with option 1. So could you explain why option 3 wasn't put forward as a recommendation? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Vadaboncourt. So option 3 was a bit of a blend of the 2 other staff or options that were considered. What that does is, should the municipality declare the application complete, it does in essence starts the clock for which the municipality has to consider and give a final decision with respect to the application. Mr. Vella has provided some work that he's done in other municipalities of how they could manage that time frame, that clock that starts ticking under the Planning Act for a final decision by council. So it was my recommendation that although that's an alternative solution, I didn't see that till today, I still am not 100% comfortable with that as being an appropriate tool to use to bridge that, the consideration of the approval of it. So we have so many days from the date the application was declared complete, actually the date it was submitted, to make a decision. And I guess an agreement or a promise by the developer that they won't file a non-decision appeal to the LPAT, although may work in other municipalities. I'm not confident, and that's something that I would support at this time either.
Are there further questions from members of council? Seeing none, I will read the report. I recommended action that Council of the Town of Penetanguishene deem the application for draft plan of subdivision file number PEN sub 2019-02 respecting the 1145 Fuller Avenue as an incomplete application, and that the Town of Penetanguishene deem the application for a zoning bylaw amendment file number ZA3 2019 requesting 1145 Fuller Avenue as an incomplete application. And finally, that the applicant be notified of the requirement to complete and finalize the update to the environmental impact study prior to further consideration of the application by the Town of Penetanguishene. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Clue, seconded by myself. So, yes, questions?
Thank you. I'd like to speak to the motion. I have difficulty supporting the motion as written. I understand the explanation that was provided with respect to option 3. My concern with the recommended or the motion is that all work stops, and that any of the work that still needs to be done in order to satisfy the municipality's requirements will stop. And that includes some of our staff time in terms of analyzing any reports that come forward. I understand and support Councillor Levy's comments with respect to that the public needs to have full information before a public meeting is scheduled, and I think option 3 does address that. I also think that if there is a tool that we can use to facilitate development, not compromise our standards, but facilitate development, such as the letter that was attached, I think we should explore that. And I think option 3 with that letter provides that kind of comfort level. I understand the need to have these studies done, and certainly it's at the developer's risk to carry on. Who knows what the results of the study, that further study, is going to be. But when you look at this development, it's been around since 2007, and it's gone through many years of analysis and a lot of review. I'm having a difficult time just stopping it at this particular point when I think there's some other viable solutions. So I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also will not be supporting it. I completely concur with what Councillor Vadabancourt has said. I do believe we are open for business. Somebody's done most of everything. I can't see just putting the brakes on, whoa, just because we're waiting for some timelines. It's their time, it's their money to produce these studies. All we're going to have invested in it is some technical review by our staff. If it could make everything go better and move along, I don't know why they just can't sit down in a room and figure out a game plan that would be suitable. So,
thank you for your comments. Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I want to put it this way. The environment is not an addendum to development. And the reason I want to mention that is because by assuming that it can come in as an addendum, basically, let's just say that whatever's coming in is really just information on desk and we're already proceeding with the development as is. If there's anything out of the environmental study that may require revisions to the other technical studies, if there's anything at all, then we have largely wasted staff time in reviewing those now. And so by saying that the environmental work that's to come isn't really required, really sort of defeats the policies we have in our official plan that say this is complete for these reasons. We need all of these documents to be complete for these reasons so we can review it all as a wholesome application.
Just an answer back. At no time was I indicating that. You know, they are very important, and they could stop the whole process. I completely understand that, and that's why I had asked earlier. It's their money. We're only out some staff time just to do a review, and if that happened to speed up the process, and that happened to let them do their first phase 6 or 8 months early, who are the benefactors? Right? So
Thank you.
That's where I was at.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to these environmental studies, and we've already heard about the Whippoorwill one, and we're saying that these are important and part and crucial to the application. Are these other studies that are required, are they able to be completed by the end of June, first part of July, and peer reviewed? Is that possible? And I guess then we would have a better idea of it would and could proceed. So is that a possibility that it can be done by the end of? Your other concern was because of these other reviews being required, that because the council was on leave or vacation July and August, that it would set you back into the fall. We've indicated that that's not necessarily the case. It could come before council in mid-July or third week of July or whatever the case may be. But the question is, are these other studies being able to be complete?
Mr. Vella or Andrea, if you could, and then Mr. Vella, I will give you an opportunity.
Well, yeah, I can't 100% answer that. I'm not the expert when it comes to natural environment. I don't know when they can complete it. That is up to the consultant. I think I did hear Mr. Vella indicate there are certain windows of when certain things have to happen, and so when that, his consultant sort of provided when that timeline would happen, the surveys, and then the report. I heard him suggest that it was July when that would happen, so I'm not sure if they can speed that up at all.
Thank you, Mr. Vella.
To your worship, the other studies are completed. They're sitting in your planning department in a box. What we would like to see happen is those studies reviewed by your staff between now and the middle of July. What the motion is on the floor is that that box be returned to our office and sit in my office until the updated environmental study is completed. That's what we're trying to prevent from happening.
Thank you. Are there further comments or questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor Levy.
That statement made more sense to me than anything else I've heard tonight. It's sitting in a box. Our planner could start dealing with that, if nothing else, and the developer gets the studies, the added studies, complete and in. So that will save time without involving any, I mean, it's just a compromise that will save some time. It's not us pre-approving without hearing about the whippoorwills, because I can hear the whippoorwills, trust me. I hate to tell you guys, but I can hear them. So where do we go from here? Can somebody make a motion? It's
Okay.
not option 3, because option 3 says it's...
Our planner wants to speak, and I do have a motion on the floor, so, Madam Planner.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, for entertaining. So this thought is crossing my mind from hearing the discussion that's happening at council that potentially what you're actually looking for is that we don't make a decision tonight to declare it incomplete or complete at all, and that this continues to be something that's being considered by staff internally, and awaiting this updated EIS and the addendum that comes forward. That I guess is an option that council could consider. I would just note that my concern with that option would be we're still at an appeal risk. I mean, we've heard them say that they're not interested in going down that, but that doesn't preclude them from actually making that appeal to the council and not making a decision on that. So should that be a consideration council wants to entertain, I would like the opportunity to look at specifically that, or request that they have that letter submitted saying they are not going to appeal the town's non-decision on the completeness of the application to avoid possible legal action on that.
Okay, I do have a motion on the floor that needs to be dealt with, and then nay or yay after we can entertain another motion, if that's Mr. Vadabonker.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to the clerk here because I think what I heard the planner say is that another option would be to defer this matter, a motion to defer. That's what I thought she was getting at, which I think would preclude consideration of this other motion. But I just want to clarify, perhaps through the clerk and the director of planning, if that's what she was suggesting as another option.
Madam, or
The motion on the floor has been moved and seconded. Yeah, I mean, it does need to be voted on. I see the conundrum that we're in right now, that certainly it may not be something that we want to see defeated, that we do want to maybe see it deferred or referred back to staff. Let me, maybe just, if you don't mind giving me just a minute to speak to the CAO about some options.
thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, you have a few minutes to have a discussion. If it was deferred. Well, it is going to go back because I already did the count.
If that's the case, if you withdraw your motion, then she doesn't have to look anything up, and then...
Oh, well, I could ask that question.
Ask the question.
Yeah. Okay.
If you can.
We're all,
If you can, ask the question if you're able.
well, we'll get this settled first.
Ask the question.
Madam Clerk, I know we did give you a few moments, but if we withdrew the motion, does that simplify the situation?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I will ask my mover if we could withdraw. Or just say yes.
Say yes or no.
Yes. Confirming Councillor Klug has withdrawn moving that motion.
Yes. And I have as well.
Thank you.
So the item has been deferred then? Or?
Now we need a separate motion deferring the item or referring it back to staff, whichever the
Thank you.
preference is.
Mr. Vadabonker, or Councillor Vadabonker, you brought this forward, so perhaps you have a motion in mind?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and that's what I was going to move, was to defer, but a question to the director with respect to doing your investigation with respect to the letter and the appropriateness of the letter. Do you need that to be included in the motion to defer, or you can do that on your own and just to carry on? Because I'm happy just to move the straight motion, but if you feel that is something that would be helpful, then that certainly could be added to the motion.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Vadaboncourt. I would want that in the motion. I think that's prudent from the municipality to protect our interest with respect to an appeal. So that would be something that I think would be prudent to include in itself. I would then need to go back and just confirm that, we've dotted I's and crossed T's with respect that we have something legal and binding with respect to that request that that the developer not appeal the non-decision.
Thank you. Mr. Vadabonker, Councillor Vadabonker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So, Madam Clerk, I'm prepared to move a motion to defer with the added paragraph dealing with what the Director of Planning has indicated. Did you capture what she had suggested?
I did not, but I will speak to the planner about getting that information to be able to read it to committee to get that approval.
Yep. We'll give them a few moments to discuss that.
Oh, I knew it would. Yeah. There's been times when they've slowed the process right down. I mean, Jess would know that. We all know that. They want to develop, and then you don't hear from them, and you don't hear from them. Yeah, she is. What's already been submitted? No? I don't think that's the understanding of this group. And George? Oh, I understand that.
Thank you for your patience. I do have a motion that the item be deferred and that the owner/applicant provide the municipality with a written confirmation acceptable to both parties to extend the time period for a non-decision appeal.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory? Well, it's probably not satisfactory, but it's a compromise. I'm sorry. It's better than what might have happened. All right, Council, we've heard comments. You'll second?
That was moved by Councillor Vatabancourt.
And seconded by Councillor Cummings. We've had good discussion on this particular item, Council, so I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. The last item under our planning and development is referrals to upcoming meetings. We still have the local smoking and vaping bylaw to deal with, vacant municipal property inventory update, facade improvement program. I just would like to comment, the other day I was driving and listening to CBC, and just for you, Councillor LaRose, information that came about was that the cities of Kawartha Lakes, they're entering into a facade improvement program, and they, I think it's 4 or 5 municipalities.
There are 4 municipalities.
$1 million is being put into businesses, so I thought that was a far cry from our 50,000 that we would like to have.
They're also redoing their brewery on the main street. So if we bring in the Kawartha Lakes Dairy and the Kawartha Brewers guys onto our main street, we're up. And their $1 million that they're putting in is also in a loan, not as in a grant.
It is part of a loan, yes, I will, but I just thought it was very interesting. Oh, you heard it too, good. Anyway, I'll call for the vote on these items. Oh, yes.
A question through to Mr. CAO. The local smoking vaping bylaw, providing options enforcing vaping, smoking or vaping public and municipal property. Do we have any idea now? It shows QT, but do we have any idea when we might expect a report on that?
Through you, Madam Chair, to His Worship. I don't have a specific timeline, but we have committed to Q2, so I can certainly assure you that I know staff are working on it. I know Bylaw through direction of our Director of Planning are working through it. There's a number of municipalities that have made some decisions that we've probably all seen in the news, and certainly I apologize I don't have any more of a concrete answer other than to suggest that it will be coming forward before the end of June, and I believe I'm fair to say our intent is try to get a council decision, as I look over at our Director of Planning, to try to get a council decision before the end of June. So at the very least, it will be presented to committee on June 12th, if not sooner.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Your Worship. Very important. It would be great to have that in place for summer activities in our parks, etc. I need a mover and a seconder to accept this move. Oh, yes, questions? No, I haven't finished with this. Councillor Vadabonker?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just that matter that we just dealt with earlier, does that need to be added to the list with respect to referrals or deferrals to staff? And is there a time frame for that?
I'm looking at the planner. It doesn't need to be added. It'll come back within a couple of months or maybe sooner, or, yep. Madam Planner, if you'd like to speak to that.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So as this is an active development application in the town, and then I've got some direction from council on continuing to manage that file, I don't believe it needs to be added to a referral, and nor would I guess that the developer or his agent wants me to not deal with this file. So you'll definitely hear with it in as quickly as a time frame as I can get to it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Were there other questions, other items? Seeing not. Sanema. All those in favor? Carried. A question period from the media or the public? Seeing none, Your Worship, it's back to you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We move on to 9, Section D, Finance and Corporate Services, and I pass it to Councillor Vadabonker.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll refer you to Section 9, Finance and Corporate Services agenda in your package. We have 2 items under the consent agenda, and our recommendation is that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information: the vacant rebate program and the 2019 quarterly financial summary for quarter number 1. Any of those 2 items that anybody wants to pull for discussion? Seeing none, may I have a mover then to accept these 2 items? Councillor Rose, second Councillor Sanema. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving next to the items for consideration. The first item is the establishment of a contract seasonal salary grid. And in your agenda package is a report from our Director of Human Resources pertaining to the establishment of a contract and seasonal salary grid, and recommendation that the Section 3 of Bylaw 2010-98 be repealed, and that the new salary grid be put into effect. And there's a change of date in your agenda. That date should be April 1st. I think it's been crossed out in the printed agenda. It said May 8th, but it should be April 1st. So if there's any questions on that proposed salary grid? Seeing none, may I have a mover for the motion? So Councillor Cummings, seconder Councillor Rose, and I'll read the motion: that the staff report regarding the contract seasonal salary grid be received, and that Schedule A, Section 3 of Bylaw 210-98, being bylaw to establish rates of pay in terms of employment for casual, permanent, part-time, contract, and seasonal employees for the town of Penetanguishene be repealed. And finally, that Attachment 1, being the contract seasonal salary grid, be approved as presented to take effect April 1st, 2019. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none? Carried. Thank you. The next item is a matter pertaining to the composition of council, and there's a report from the clerk with respect to the composition of council. The recommended action is that the composition of council in the town of Penetanguishene be restructured for the 2022 municipal election to 7 members as follows: a mayor elected at large, deputy mayor elected at large, 5 councillor positions elected at large, and that the clerk be directed to provide notice and hold a public information session prior to the passing of the bylaw. Madam Clerk, is there anything that you wanted to add to your report?
Nothing that, other than the clarification that was sent earlier about the numbers being transposed incorrectly. The numbers were correct in the black line study. It was just a matter of me punching them into the report where there was a bit of a typo, so those have been corrected. And of course, any questions?
Okay,
Happy to
thank
take.
you. So, members of council, any questions on this report? Madam Deputy Mayor?
It's not a question, Councillor. Council sitting around this table has know that I have long supported downsizing our council from 9 to 7. And I guess with the current provincial government review, reviewing regional and county of Simcoe and lower tier municipalities, looking for improved representation, improving quality of service, and reducing costs, I would like to point out that the ratio in the county for representation by population is 1 to 3,000. Here in Penetanguishene, with a population of approximately 9,000, reducing council size to 7 is still above the average. Reducing the size of council includes more efficient use of council and staff time. I fully support the report, and I do hope that there is enough support here this evening that we deal with this issue. I've been thrown out under the bus, I would say, for many years in a row, but that's okay. I think it's opportune time for us to do this. A little while ago, Councillor Mayette did talk about the regional situation. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have heard loud and clear that they want efficiencies within the system, and I think this demonstrates that. So I fully support the motion, Councillor Vadabonker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Vadabonker. Yes, I'm quite aware that the Deputy Mayor for, I don't know, some 26 odd years has been pushing this and has been thrown under the bus all those years, and I was one of them that pushed her under the bus. However, I think with the looking at the whole deal and the efficiencies is the important part. It's not so much the cost savings as much as the efficiencies. And then we're looking at this regional government review, and we know from it all that that's one of the major issues that they're looking at is creating efficiencies. And so for the first time, I will support it.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, thank you to staff. I think this is an excellent report, and one I was, I guess, crossing my fingers would come forward pretty soon. I've never been one to look for popularity, so I'm going to go on record and say I think we could go right to 5. This is such a hardworking council that 5 would be great. I'll settle with 7. 7 sounds good to me, and I'm really happy to see this go forward with some efficiencies. Redirect that money to maybe facade improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Clue. And with that, I see Councillor Rose's hand is up. So, Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Holy jeez. Where to start? It does bother me a little bit that this report did come through right now. I find it very, very, very unfair to our newly elected council members. They have been here for approximately 8, maybe 9 meetings. They've never been through an entire budget system, so they do not know what the workload is. They do not know what is required. I don't understand how you take 9 brains in a room and reduce that to 7 or 5 brains, and that makes it more efficient. That, to me, just doesn't make sense. The more people always makes the work go better. When I look back at the amount of time that most of us have been here, I look at we've had lots of female people, we've had lots of male people, we've had rich people, we've had poor people, young people, old people, and it's the diversity that makes this council work. That's why 9 is a very good number. When I look back at some of our local politicians in different municipalities that have a shorter number, and I'm sure most of us can recall what happened. If you have one person that has 2 friends, you can change the world. And you can change it in a big way, in a bad way. And that has happened, as we all know, around our county. Whereas with 9, you got to have 4 friends that make sense, right? And out of those 9 people, there's always a different forum that comes up. Somebody always has a different opinion, something that we may not look at. Some people around council had kids, some people haven't had kids. You know, they look at it from a completely different outlook. So I'm wondering what the timeline is now. What is the great big hurry? Like, we need to do this when these new people have only had 8 meetings to get acclimated. Knowing that the regional review is coming, we could be doing all of this. Let's send staff over here, make a new thing, and get the new bylaws. And 6 months from now, the whole world goes kapoof and it's changed anyway. What's the difference of waiting 6 months and saying, well, let's see what their review says, see what position we're in? Why go and change something when we know something could happen? When we get down to saving money, as Councillor Clue said, I don't know, every time this has been brought up and every time I've talked to every single member of the public that has brought it up to me, once they understood the money of it, they're astonished. For the price of one large coffee per year, per person in the town, that pays for a whole councillor. We have 10,000 people, it's 20 grand, it's $2 a head a year. So would you rather see 2 less people or 4 less people sitting at this table for the price of a cup of coffee? No one is worth 1 cup per year. It's nothing, folks. We spend more money on garbage than $20,000 in a heartbeat. So, you know, everybody, once they're explained that, I've never had one single person say, hey, I can get you to come to 30 council meetings a year for the price of 1 Timmy's. You know, we are a bargain, an absolute bargain. So, again, as always, over the last 20 years, we're throwing the deputy mayor under the bus, and, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. I'm going to go to Councillor Mayotte, and then Councillor Sanama, and then Councillor Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree 100% with Councillor Rose. It's worked great with 7 councillors, mayor and a deputy mayor. I had spoken before my reason, and again, before we do any voting on this, why don't we wait for this provincial government? I mean, I'd hate to throw the mayor and the deputy mayor and a councillor under the bus, but I mean, let's postpone it, and let's wait to at least what the provincial government tells us what to do. This may all change. I can't see why we have to rush this tonight, so I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Mayotte. Councillor Sanama?
I just want to go on record, one, that it is an excellent report. Personally, I really appreciate the fact that it is coming out now during the election campaign. The number of people that were asking me about the size of our council compared to the size of our population, it was huge. And my take on during the campaign was we were going to be in favor. I was personally going to be in favor of reducing the council. I'm quite in favor of the proposal that's being brought forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Levy?
Well, I see she's going to win this one. It's been a long time coming. I've always, 19 years ago, something like that, I was with a deputy mayor on the reduction, and I no longer am, simply because of what Councillor Rose said. I have seen a smaller council, sometimes there's personality-driven splits, and that serves no one. My God, it's awful. We've seen it happen. Tiny Township, to name one, where it was a 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2. When you have a larger council, that's not going to happen. There's going to be more independent voting and fewer coalitions. Independence is gold for every council. So I've also seen a council not too many years ago here where 2 councillors consistently didn't show up, consistently, and for the last half of their term. So, and there's no way to sanction them if they just follow the rules. And so, for the price tag, I'd say, I will support the status quo, but I understand that the tide is turning. Persistence.
Councillor Cummings, and I think everybody else has had a chance, so I'm going to speak after Councillor Cummings.
Well, I was a bus pusher way back when as well. I will support 7. I would not support 5 for sure because that's too small a council. But I will support 7.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. So I just have a few comments, and it's been good to listen to everybody's comments around the table. Like Councillor Sanama, I did hear on the campaign trail a consistent message about reducing the size of council, and in fact, that was one of the issues that I wrote down, that this council needed to deal with it. I'm happy that it's here now. I think that with any kind of decision like that could impact individuals going forward, it's better to have the decision made sooner than later, so I'm glad that it's here now. From personal experience, I've worked with a council in the past of 7 members, and I think it can be quite effective as a council. I would not support 5 members for the reasons outlined earlier, but certainly from my standpoint, I would support going to 7, and therefore I would support the motion. Any further comments around the table? I'm going to ask for a mover, and I see Councillor Sanama put up her hand, so I'm going to read the motion. And so I have it moved by Councillor Sanama, seconded by Madam Deputy Mayor. I wasn't going to look over there, but so the motion moved by Councillor Sanama, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo, that the composition of council in the town of Penetanguishene be restructured for the 2022 municipal election to 7 members as follows: Mayor elected at large, Deputy Mayor elected at large, 5 councillor positions elected at large, and that the clerk be directed to provide notice and to hold a public information session prior to the passing of the bylaw. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the 2019 tax rates and levies. And there's a motion in your agenda package that the 2019 tax rates and levies be adopted as presented, and that the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. Before I ask the treasurer just to elaborate, there's been a couple of changes from when we last considered the budget, just in terms of the impact of the county levy and the education tax rate, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe she can just give a quick highlight. It's outlined in the report, but I think it's a good news story that's worthy to repeat for the benefit of everyone. Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the 2019 final draft of the budget that was presented to council, that was the last time. It is attached to, the link is provided attached to this report for information, but I'll just refresh your memories. So when the 2019 budget was adopted, the estimated potential tax impact for the municipal taxes was 1.4%. And at that time, a county estimate and a education estimate was made by myself, best guess, and bringing the overall potential tax impact to 0.4%. In relation to the tax bill compared to the prior year. So we just recently received the county tax ratios and tax rates, as well as the provincial education rates. And when we apply those rates overall to our 2019 assessment, our 2019 municipal tax impact actually came in at 1.9%, so 0.5% higher than anticipated. And that was due to some tax ratio changes that came down from the county. Typically, they don't occur every year, And this year, there was a change to the tax ratio, so there was no way to estimate the impact of that. But the impact of that was 0.5% on the municipal tax impact, making it 1.9%. But the overall impact did reduce. So when the actual county rates came in, again, just a reminder to everybody that the county budget obviously increased. But when you look at the growth in the southern end of the county versus our municipality, our share of that growth reduced. So we did see a county reduction, and the same kind of scenario goes with the education. So overall, with the county reduction as well as the education rate reduction, the 2019 total tax impact overall is 0.2%, or a dollar value of $3.32 per $100,000 of CVA.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. So as I said, I thought that was really good news when we discussed this at section. So 0.2% tax rate increase blended is quite commendable, and certainly from the residents of Penetanguishene, I think they'll be quite satisfied, I think, with that tax rate increase. And I think the budget, I think, has a lot of programs in it, a lot of capital initiatives, road works. There's a lot accomplished in that budget, and for a 0.2% tax rate increase. So any other comments or questions of the Treasurer on this? Thank you, Madam Treasurer. So may I have a motion then to adopt the recommendation? Councillor Sandoval, seconder. Councillor Rose. So I'll read the motion again. That the 2019 tax rates and levies be adopted as presented. And that the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. The last item under business for consideration is the Southern Georgian Bay Physician Recruitment Program funding. And there's a recommended action that the Southern Georgia Bay Physician Recruitment Program funding be approved as outlined in option 1. And that, a name has been inserted here, so I'll read the name, and that Mayor LaRue join the Family Physician Recruitment Steering Committee as a voting member. So I'll open up for questions on this particular item. You'll see the recommendation with respect to the funding. It's multi-year funding being proposed starting in 2019 and carrying for 4 years. And I'll see if there's any questions. Members of council, any questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. I'm not in agreement with option 1 for the multiple year, only because of our policy regarding contributions to the community. Previous council decided not to go with contributions to the recruitment back in 2012. It's been 7 years, and we have just agreed to go for another 3 years at $10,000 for the capital campaign for the hospital. And I'm not really sure this is I shouldn't say valid. I'm not sure whether I agree with what's going on. And when we asked staff to do the report, we asked about what was Midland doing in Tiny and Tay. I don't see anything here, so I'm not sure. I know there was an application process for Midland, but I'm not sure what happened with Tiny and Tay. So that's sort of some of the questions I have regarding this fund.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. I know at section we did speak about that, and I know the CAO was going to be looking into what the other municipalities were doing with respect to this particular matter. Mr. CAO, had you had the opportunity to speak with the other municipalities to see what their position is on this request?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just pulling up, the only one that we didn't have confirmation from was, I believe, Tay Township. And I'm just trying to pull up the other two. Midland pushed the request through to their grants application process. If you just bear with me a sec here, I'm just going to try and pull up the email.
Well, the CEO is doing that. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Rose.
I was sort of on the same wavelength as Councillor Cummings. We've done our hospital money that we're spending on hard dollars. Over the years, I've never been a supporter, as everybody will remember, of physician recruitment, because I didn't want to be the person living in Gravenhurst that had our one and only doctor there poached by Penetang to come down here. That's mean, that's nasty, that's just not right. So the idea of someone going and poaching other community doctors to screw them over just so we can have one, that's just not fair. So I think the recruitment physician position is doing well. They've done well. They had an abundance of money, according to Mr. Gravel when he was here. For them to go back and do their own fundraising and let the community pitch in for what they want to do for that, that's fine. So I was comfortable with us doing our capital commitment, but I'm not comfortable with us doing this at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. CEO, did you were able to find the information?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did, back in the beginning of April, that was one of the specific questions we had asked Mr. Gravel. He confirmed that Tiny Township is on board. Midland has budgeted for the funds, but have pushed the process through their new grants application process, I guess you could say, of which Mr. Gravel is in the process of completing that application. Off the record, Mr. Gravel has been assured that the funding is secure, but dare I say that? And certainly he was presenting to Tay Township on April 10th, the same day that committee received his request letter. We did reach out to Tay Township, and we haven't heard back, so we will follow up with Mr. Gravel just to see if there's any answer. The last conversation I had with staff at Tay Township was that there was no decision made at this point, but we will certainly follow up again with Mr. Gravel and see if we can get an answer out of Tay Township.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. I see Councillor Levy and then Deputy Mayor Dubo. So Councillor Levy first, please.
If Tay does vote in favor, it'll be the first time ever. They have never funded physician recruitment. I'm not going to support this. The organization, as I understand, has a surplus of $90,000. That's quite an incredible surplus. And but on the other hand, it gives them time, it gives them a cushion to sort out fundraising opportunities. Another reason I'm not going to favor it is that it didn't come in before budget deliberations took place, and that's you see the same with everybody else. He's missed the mark. Other people come to us in the months prior, but this was after budget, which really politically was not terribly astute, because we have to be planning these things in advance. So I support physician recruitment, but I do not support us funding it, and certainly not on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly will be supporting what's in front of us this evening. To have a vibrant hospital, we need to have doctors. And this is a far cry from what they asked us for funding many moons ago. So I think the $8,500 that they're asking for, is it not, was a certain ratio to population? So I certainly think that in the scheme of things, we should be able to find $8,500 to support this recommendation. So.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also will be supporting this, and I will also be supporting option 1. I know that in the past we did fund them and then we got away from it, but I also realize and know from having gone through a long session of reporting on this issue that the physician recruitment team has done an excellent job for our area and our community, and it's not just a matter of them finding doctors coming in from next door. Some of our new doctors, our doctors are actually from the United States. My doctor is an American. And, you know, $85 per year for the next 4 years to make sure that we have physicians available to our taxpayers. And that, to me, again, is part of the scenario of an obligation to our taxpayers. And to me, it becomes an obligation to make sure that they don't go without having the need of a doctor on hand. So I definitely will be supporting, and I will be supporting option 1.
Thank you, Worship. Any other comments? Councillor Sanama, you look like you're still pondering. Maybe I can comment, and if you feel like, just raise your hand. So this one is a little bit of a challenge. Councillor Cummings and I did talk about this with respect to an approach, and one of the things that we thought that might be appropriate was to give or to recommend approval be granted for the 2019 fiscal year, and that when we start the preparation of the budget for 2020 is that we give consideration to that, and that's option 2. Councillor Cummings, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate any further on that, but that was something that we did talk about at section. I'm really pleased to hear, although Tay hasn't committed, I'm pleased to hear that the North Simcoe municipalities have collaborated in this, and I think that's the way to go, because I think whether you're a resident in Penetanguishene or Tiny or whatever, I think a family physician in our area certainly supports the whole region. And so showing the collaboration of the 4 municipalities, I think, shows a strong signal to those that are watching that we certainly will work together on items that make sense to us as a broader community. So I'm prepared to support providing the funding. It's just whether the multi-year funding at this particular point in time is the way to go, or should we just deal with it on an annual basis as the budget comes forward? And I'm still wrestling with that. So I'll pause at this point. Councillor Sanama, did you have any comments that you wanted to make? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've been looking at these numbers, and when I look at over the last, how many years it is, that we've committed $110,000 to the hospital in general, and we've committed $98,250 to the physician recruitment, of which we haven't put any money into it in the last 7 years, roughly. My personal opinion is I would rather see the money go directly to the hospital campaign itself and to the capital needs of the hospital as opposed to the physician recruitment. I know that it's a good plan. I think that the work that it's doing is quite efficient, and they're doing a great job, but I don't know whether it's our position to have to be funding it. So at this moment, I'm going to say I would not support it going forward.
Thank you. Any further comments on this? So there is a motion that I spoke to earlier. It has not been moved or seconded. So do I have a mover and a seconder to put it on the floor?
Could I ask a question?
Certainly, Madam Deputy Mayor.
I was just thinking if Councillor Cummings would support the motion if we went just on a yearly basis, if that could be added and modify the motion that's before us somehow to reflect that we would deal with it on a yearly basis.
So, Madam Deputy Mayor, the motion is not before us formally, so I think we can make a change at this particular point. The clerk is nodding her head. So Councillor Cummings, with respect to, I know we talked about this at sections, so support for 1 year and then be considered as part of the budget process in future
Yeah,
years.
as much as it goes against the grain, and this is a provincial responsibility because we are in the business to build roads, not to find physicians, I would go with 1 year, so option 2.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. So, I'll read the motion as here. Sorry, before I do that, I'll defer to the treasurer. Madam Treasurer, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just wanted to make one comment. After reviewing the report, discussing the report during our agenda review, just a recommendation, if council does wish to proceed with either option 1 or option 2, and in this case, if I might suggest a friendly amendment that in terms of being more expedient, I think funding it from the 2017 surplus that has already been established would be more efficient than having to wait until we finalize our 2018 surplus.
So thank you, Madam Treasurer. I'm just looking at option 2, and it doesn't make reference to the funding source. It just says that funding be provided. Option 1, I think, did make reference to the funding source, if I'm not mistaken. No, I read it somewhere where it talked about. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so it would just be 2017? I just don't have it in the motion that's before me here.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Yeah, if it can just be included, and that the 2019 funding request be approved from the 2017 surplus. In the middle of the motion? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just looking to the clerk. Is the clerk capturing this, Madam Clerk?
Absolutely. If committee wants to see the amendment be for option 2, and I've added, and finally that the funding be allocated from the 2017 surplus.
So, Madam Clerk, just for clarity, maybe you can just read the motion from the beginning, and then we'll look for a mover and a seconder.
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you.
That the Southern Georgian Bay Physician Recruitment Program funding request be approved as outlined in option number 2, and that Mayor Doug LaRue join the Family Physician Recruitment Steering Committee as a voting member, and finally that funding be allocated from the 2017 surplus.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, having heard the motion, do we have a mover for that motion? Madam Deputy Mayor, a seconder? A seconder? Oh, Councillor Clue, thank you very much. So, all those in favor? Questions. Oh, sorry, pardon me. So, questions before we deal with the motion. Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I have this correct. We're going to give 1 year's worth of funding to a group that didn't come in on time before our budget, that doesn't meet with our procedures for what community ones we service, and we're all sitting around here saying they do a good job, but they have $90,000 and it's a provincial responsibility. Just want to make sure that that's what we're talking about voting on.
Councillor, I believe that's the case. Sorry, Your Worship.
I could also make the comment, Mr. Chair, that it's a provincial obligation or a Department of Health obligation, but on the other hand, we've also committed to the hospital a sizable amount for the next 3 years, and they fall under the same obligation, yet we support them, and we have many other organizations in the municipality that support them. And the one thing I know for sure is that the hospitals don't provide doctors.
The provision of capital money is not a provincial responsibility.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor, any further questions on the motion as read? So I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? So, so we need those opposed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the motion is defeated. Thank you. So we have referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. There's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. 6 items, and item 6 is the one dealing with physician options related to requests for funding, including historical funding. Madam Clerk, has that one been dealt with this evening? Is it?
Which one? Physician recruitment, I guess technically, yes, that could be removed.
Okay. Any items to add to this? Yes, Councillor Levy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we had any discussions or any scheduled on the recent funding announced by Minister Clark about a month and a half ago? And if not, why not and when?
Thank you, Councillor Levy. So I'll refer to the CAO with respect to that question. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been some discussions. Committee will recall I believe there was a consent item on an agenda shortly thereafter Minister Clark announced the funding, and I committed to returning before summer recess with a report. So we have had some discussions internally at senior team. We've also solicited some feedback from our frontline staff around possible uses of some components of that funding, and certainly our intention is to bring a number of financial grants or funding opportunities on the June 12th committee meeting. And the number of those components are the municipal modernization funding of $650,000, the one-time federal gas tax doubling of, I think, $290,000. We have some assessment growth, which is $250,000 plus. We also have the 2017 and 2018 surplus. So our intention is to bring all those components. So that will be quite a hefty meeting, I guess, on June 12th. I think the number is roughly $1.7 million that committee will be entertaining. Some of it does have some restrictions or criteria, being the federal gas tax as an example. So I think the answer to the question is yes, there has been some discussions internally, and certainly we will be following through with the commitment that I made to committee of returning back before summer recess.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Councillor Levy, does that answer your question? Thank you. So we did talk about this briefly at section, and one of the things we did discuss would be it would make sense to bring it all back in one report, so that council had the full picture in terms of what the available funding is for council to deliberate and then make decisions looking at the full pot of money. So June 12th, I think, is that date. So any other items? Mr. CAO?
Mr. Chair, if I just might, and you'll see this on the next agenda, but we will be amending the expected date for the first item, the Huroney Airport Commission Joint Business Operation Review. We've identified expected date of Q2 2019. Given that the award for the tender between the ownership group or the three municipalities was approximately 3 to 4 weeks later than expected, the project completion isn't expected until the end of June, so we'll be bumping that to Q3 2019. The community consultation is expected for the week of May 21st, and there will be a public survey that's released very shortly, asking for feedback from the community as well as users and tenants of the airport.
Thank you. Any further comments? So I have a motion that Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following additional existing referrals to coming agendas and staff as outlined, and I was outlined with the amendments as discussed. Any further comments or questions? May I have a mover? Councillor Cummings, a seconder. Councillor Mayotte, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. And on questions from the media and the public, seeing none, Your Worship, I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Badewalker. Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Saint-Amand. All in favor. We are adjourned.